Hi, everyone. This is David Steinman. I'm the author of the new book, Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins. I wanted to share today how I came to write this book. It's not my first, and I thought it would be useful for you to know a little bit about me, so you know that the person who's giving you this advice is someone you can rely on and is a straight shooter and is going to tell you the facts and give you the interpretations that are best for your health. So I grew up in Los Angeles, California. And I fished most of my life. From the time I was like 4 or 5 years old, I would go down to a creek called Ballona Creek and catch perch and flounder and cook them up there or take them home and eat them. Later, I began fishing on sport fishing boats that operated out of all the ports and harbors along the Southern California coast from Santa Barbara all the way down to San Diego. I even worked on a sport fishing boat I even worked on a commercial perch seiner, and I can't tell you the name, but I can tell you something. They were from Half Moon Bay. I can't give you the captain's name. I really can't. But they were down in Los Angeles and fishing mackerel and tuna for the fish market in the cannery. And their real money came from drug smuggling. I wasn't part of that crew. I was kind of one of the people they picked up and who they left behind when they went down to Mexico or Colombia. So when I see Trump shooting down this little Boston whaler or whatever it was, this 11, 16-foot boat, he's just killing fishermen. I mean, he's just killing people. If you really think there's drugs on there weren't. I know that's an aside, but I mean, they have offered no proof because you can't carry it, when I worked on this boat, it was 60 feet long. It had an enormous hold for holding fish. You can imagine how many bales of marijuana or whatever they were going to bring up, cocaine, it could hold. It was worthwhile. This little Boston whaler was not carrying drugs, I can tell you that. It wasn't coming to California. You can't in such a small boat, not practically. But anyway, I grew up fishing and eating the fish. And around 1985, dolphins began showing up on the shores of some of the beaches in Southern California. And they were dying or dead. And their blubber was just really high in chemicals called DDT, that's a pesticide, and PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyl, which is an industrial chemical. They were really high. And there were scientists and biologists working at the Southern California Water Research Project in Long Beach. And I got together with them as a reporter for the LA Weekly, and we started talking about what was going on. I had read Rachel Carson, and I am a child of Rachel Carson. I'm really proud of that. She's my mama. She invented it all. She gave us the language. This is a very young movement, anti-toxic. She gave us the language, and she gave me inspiration about how to express things. And we've invented even more words and concepts since she first wrote, but she's the mother of modern environmentalism. So I had read her, and I was talking to the folks at the California Coastal Water Research Project, and then I went back to my editor at the LA Weekly, and we started talking about what to do, how to cover this story. We already knew that there was a lot of pesticide and PCB in the dolphins, and that was probably harming their immune systems and making them susceptible to parasites and other diseases. And we also knew from previous research that DDT was thinning eggshells among birds of prey along the Southern California coast. That would be like falcons and eagles. And they were unable to breed or found it very difficult to breed. And we also found that during this period, you would see females clustering with females because they were exhibiting changes in gender behavior, although not everyone was attuned to that at that time. But this is the background, and this was like 1985. There was no labeling, nothing going on in terms of informing people. If you think it's dark now, and it really is dark now, it was so dark then. It was so dark, man, I was holding a candle out. Anyway, I was working with the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project and my editors at the LA Weekly. And my editor and I decided, you know what? We got to make this relevant to people. So let's find people who are eating fish from the bay, the same fish that the dolphins are eating, and see if they have high levels of DDT and PCBs. That was a really impossible assignment, totally impossible to do. But that's why I'm here. Sometimes you can do the impossible. We did it. I worked with a friend of mine, a physician who was just finishing up his residency at Glendale Adventist. I worked with the great late John Eubankoff, a great marine biologist associated with USC, and Dr. Henry Puffer, who was a toxicologist at SC in the marine toxicology, and had done some earlier work in this area and was vitally interested and had done a seafood consumption survey that we could use to determine how much seafood locally caught people are eating versus how much seafood they're eating that wasn't locally caught, because it was a special case here. the fish in the Santa Monica Bay were really highly contaminated. Let me go give you a little bit of the backstory. There is a company called Montrose that at the time was manufacturing DDT for export. It had been banned in the US since 72, but it was still being manufactured in South Central LA for export because it wasn't banned in other countries. But what the company was doing, with permission from our public officials, and this really hurts and makes me angry, they were barging out the DDT waste sludge into the Santa Monica Bay in barrels. And then they would hack them open so that they would sink to the bottom and not pose a navigation hazard. Now, whether they were hacked open isn't really the issue, because the issue is the barrels eventually deteriorated anyway. And all this DDT, 2,000 tons of DDT, was released into the bay and contaminated everyone, all the fish, all the dolphins, and as my study later showed, all of the people, including myself. That's how I discovered my own DDT poisoning. So I'm one of the OG when it comes to DDT poisoning. I had been eating fish contaminated apparently with DDT since probably the 60s. When I was an innocent child, no one told me. But fish on my father's boat eat all sorts of fish. No one told us that the opali or the calico bass or the barracuda, the white sea bass, that it was contaminated. And a lot of people didn't find out. And what I learned from the study was people were getting hurt, because in that study, for example, one person I met was dying of liver cancer, and I met him at the Venice Pier. His bucket was filled with white croakers. And he said, he was there with his wife, and he said, well, this is what we live on. You know, we're not rich. We come here and fish and we catch these fish and eat them. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I used to work for the Postal Service, but I don't anymore because I have liver cancer. And I looked at the white croakers and I looked at him. The connection was as obvious as could be. In another case, I visited a sport fishing boat working out of Redondo Beach, where the skipper, woman, had hypertension, and her levels of DDT and PCBs were off the charts. In another situation, in on one of the sport fishing boats, I met the skipper, whose levels of DDT and PCBs were extremely high, and so was their hypertension. And that's a real symptom of DDT poisoning. I met a woman who was breastfeeding her baby. She had some of the highest levels of DDT in her blood, which meant it was in her breast milk. She asked the doctor, we visited her at her home, whether she should continue to breastfeed her baby. And it was a really difficult decision for him, an answer for him to make. And he said that that was a really high level of DDT, and maybe she didn't want to do that. It was really a difficult situation. She asked him, well, is my baby going to be all right? She wanted him to say so right then and there, and he couldn't. He didn't know. And she looks all right. She looks okay. Everything will be okay. But she was poisoned, really high levels, probably some of the highest in the study. So these folks were all among the poison that we met. And that's how I know that what we eat impacts our health. Since then, the studies have been done, epidemiological studies that validate everything I'm telling you, that when people eat seafood high in carcinogens, they're at greater risk for cancer. My work was later verified at the National Academy of Sciences, where from 1989 to 1991, I represented the public interest on a committee there that was studying safe seafood and advising Congress. So these are some of the things that are in my background and led me to write my newest book, Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins. You can get a copy at Amazon.com or by using the link in this post. I'll do more follow-up stories and tell you more about the things I've done and why what I'm telling you is really important for your health and our nation's health and our future generations' health. And thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.